billionaire CEO daughter, was born blind, until the new chef discovered the truth. She had lived in darkness all her life, believing blindness was her cage. Then a new chef arrived, a woman whose gentle voice and daring flavors carried a truth powerful enough to shatter everything she thought she knew. Welcome to Becky Stories, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this beautiful story, hit subscribe and settle down to the splendors of this beautiful evening. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Tomorrow, I will share another captivating story. Let's begin. The Moretti mansion was a palace of silence. Marble floors echoed footsteps like accusations. Chandeliers glittered for no audience, and every curtain was drawn tight as though the world outside might bruise what lived within. Elena Moretti, daughter of the most ruthless CEO in New York, traced the outline of the piano keys with careful fingers. She had never seen them, never seen anything, but she loved their smooth, cool texture. To her father, blindness was fragility. To Elena, it was invisibility. Elena, her father's voice cut across the quiet, sharp and commanding, though softened at the edges when it landed on her. Don't push yourself. You've had enough for tonight. She didn't argue. She rarely did. But inside her, a storm gathered, quiet and unspoken. When will I be more than what you let be? Downstairs, far from velvet drapes and glass chandeliers, the kitchen pulsed with life. Martha Morgan, the new hire, pulled her hair into a knot and rolled her sleeves. She wasn't supposed to be here, at least not in this world of silver trays and imported caviar. Her world was smaller kitchens, neighborhood cafes, the places where food was survival, not prestige. This mansion could feed 3 villages, she muttered, pulling fresh herbs from a crate. The sense of thyme and basil clung to her hands, grounding her in something real. She had taken the job because she needed it desperately. But jobs, she knew, never stayed simple. Especially when secrets clung to her past like scars she couldn't scrub away. Cruz, the butler snapped, his voice tight as his bow tie. Miss Elena is delicate. Simple meals. No experiments. Your job is to make her comfortable, nothing more. Martha smirked faintly, though her chest tightened. Understood. But she wasn't here to boil bland soup. Cooking was the only language she trusted, the only way she told the truth. That night, Elena left her room, drawn by something unusual. The air smelled different. Not the same lukewarm broth she endured every evening. This was vibrant, garlic meeting olive oil, rosemary crackling against heat. Her cane tapped across the marble as she followed the trail like a moth to flame. Her father would disapprove, but curiosity burned stronger than caution. At the kitchen doorway, she paused, listening. The gentle hiss of a pan, the scrape of a spoon, and, softly, someone humming. That, Elena's voice trembled as she spoke, smells incredible. Martha nearly dropped the pan. She hadn't heard her come in. She turned, taking in the girl framed by shadows at the door. Her eyes, sightless yet searching, tilted toward her. Miss Moretti, Martha said carefully, wiping her hands on her apron. You shouldn't be here. Elena tilted her chin, a small rebellion. And yet I am. A faint smile tugged her lips. What are you making? Just supper. Martha wanted to sound detached, but the girl's presence stirred something unexpected. Elena stepped forward, fingertips brushing the counter's edge. It doesn't smell like just supper. Silence lingered, charged, fragile. Martha watched the way Elena's hand moved, how she mapped the world with her touch. For the first time since entering this mansion, Martha felt seen, even by someone who could not see it all. You cook differently, Elena whispered, her voice a mix of wonder and defiance. Like you're trying to tell me a story. Martha swallowed hard. No one had ever said that to her before. And though her job was to stay invisible, something in that moment told her invisibility was no longer possible. Upstairs, Elena's father stood in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched at his desk. A portrait of his late wife stared back at him, her eyes full of light he'd long buried. He clenched his jaw, the old vow replaying. I'll protect Elena, even from herself. What he didn't know was that downstairs, in the warmth of the kitchen, protection was already giving way to something far more dangerous: connection. If you were Elena, suffocated by wealth but denied freedom, would you have stepped into that kitchen and spoken up, or stayed in the safety of silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following evening, Martha prepared dinner with unusual care. She shouldn't have. She was warned to keep it simple. But she couldn't shake the memory of Elena standing in the doorway the night before, her soft voice daring to challenge the silence of this mansion. She chopped herbs finely, the rhythm of her knife a heartbeat against the wooden board. Olive oil hissed as it hit the pan, carrying the earthy aroma of sautéed mushrooms. Cooking had always been her rebellion, her art. Tonight, it was also her invitation. Elena was waiting. She felt it, something different in the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. When the butler delivered her tray, she touched the plate cautiously, her fingertips mapping the edge. The scent was intoxicating. Truffle, garlic, and something sweeter beneath. She lifted the fork carefully, tasting. Her lips parted, a sharp breath escaping. "This," she set the fork down, her hand trembling slightly. "This doesn't taste like comfort food." The butler stiffened, about to scold. But Elena's voice rose with rare authority. "Bring me the chef." Moments later, Martha entered the conservatory, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair had slipped loose, a strand falling over her cheek. She looked out of place amid the velvet drapes and crystal glasses, but her presence filled the room all the same. "You asked for me, Miss Moretti?" Elena leaned forward, her blind eyes searching in Martha's direction. "You cooked this?" "Yes. It's alive." Elena smiled faintly, though her throat felt tight. "I didn't know food could feel like freedom." Martha froze. She wasn't used to praise, let alone words that pierced so deeply. "I just wanted you to taste something different." Elena tilted her head, her voice soft but sharp. "You don't cook to feed. You cook to reveal." The air stilled. Martha's chest tightened. How could Elena, who had never seen her, who had known her for only 2 nights, already see so much? Over the next days, it became their ritual. Martha cooked, not the bland meals the butler demanded, but small rebellions of flavor. Elena waited, eager not only for the food, but for the stolen conversations that followed. One evening, Martha asked gently, "Do you ever imagine what colors might look like?" Elena's lips parted. No one had asked her that before. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But it's not color I long for. It's freedom. To walk outside without my father's shadow. To choose. To live." Martha's chest ached at the rawness in her voice. She wanted to say something comforting, but instead, she whispered, "You don't need sight to see. You already see more than most." Elena's throat tightened. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't pitying her. Someone was believing in her. Then came the night of the spark, the truth Martha hadn't expected. Elena was trying to cut a piece of bread at the table when the knife slipped. Reflexively, Martha reached forward, steadying her hand. Their skin touched, warm, electric. Elena gasped but didn't pull away. "Sorry," Martha murmured, withdrawing too quickly. But as she did, she noticed something strange. Elena's eyes followed her movement. Not perfectly, not sharply, but there was a flicker, a trace of instinctive tracking. Martha froze. She tested it. Slowly, she waved her hand near Elena's face. Elena blinked. Her breath caught. "What are you doing?" Elena asked softly, sensing the pause in the air. Martha's heart pounded. "Your eyes," you reacted. "You followed me." Elena frowned. "That's impossible. I was born blind." But Martha's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling with something between fear and wonder. "Maybe not the way they told you." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Elena's chest rose and fell rapidly, her world tilting. "My father said," she began, then stopped, her voice cracking. "He said there was nothing anyone could do." Martha swallowed hard, her instincts pulling her forward. "I'm not a doctor. I don't know the truth yet." "But Elena," she leaned closer, her voice low and steady. "Something isn't what you've been told." Elena's hands clenched the table, her knuckles pale. For the first time, she wasn't just blind. She felt betrayed. The door opened suddenly. Her father entered, his expression dark as he took in the scene. Elena trembling. Martha too close. "What is going on here?" His voice cracked like a whip. Elena flinched. Martha stepped back. But before the silence could smother her, Elena lifted her chin and whispered the words that could not be taken back. She said, "I might not be as blind as you've always told me." The room froze. The CEO's face hardened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. And in that moment, both women knew the truth had been set loose, and nothing would ever be the same. If you were Martha, would you have told Elena what you saw, risking her father's wrath, or stayed silent to protect yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The days after the confrontation were suffocating. Elena's father, Alessandro Moretti, tightened his grip on the house. Guards at the gates, stricter routines, doors locked at night. He spoke to Elena less, as though silence itself might erase the words she had uttered at dinner. But silence could not erase them. They lived in her chest, an echo that would not quiet, maybe not the way they told you. Elena sat in her room, tracing the edges of her braille books with shaking fingers. Her heart had become restless. Every time she blinked, she remembered how Martha said her eyes had followed movement. She couldn't deny she had felt it too, an odd awareness she had always ignored. And yet, fear coiled inside her. What if Martha was wrong? What if hope was a crueler prison than blindness itself? When the butler brought her bland soup that evening, she pushed it away. "Where's Chef Cruz?" she asked, voice sharp. "She is indisposed," he replied stiffly, which meant one thing: punished. Elena's throat tightened. Her father was trying to silence the one person who had dared to tell her something different. Meanwhile, Martha stood in the cold stainless steel hush of the kitchen. She wasn't cooking. She wasn't allowed. The butler had ordered her to scrub pans instead, a humiliation meant to remind her of her place. Her knuckles were raw from steel wool, but it wasn't the physical sting that cut deepest. It was Elena's voice replaying in her mind, fragile but fierce. He said there was nothing anyone could do. She shouldn't have spoken. She shouldn't have let her heart rule her head. She had only wanted to help Elena taste freedom, not to unravel her entire life. Now, she feared she'd lose the only place she'd managed to carve out for herself. But worse than losing her job was the thought of Elena, believing she was nothing more than fragile porcelain. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She paced the conservatory, cane tapping against the marble floor, her breath shallow. The scent of rosemary and olive oil had faded from the halls since Martha had been silenced, and the emptiness gnawed at her. Finally, she whispered into the quiet, as though the house itself might deliver her message. "Martha, why did you tell me that?" The walls gave no answer, but her heart beat the truth she already knew, because Martha cared. The next morning, fate, or stubbornness, drew them together again. Martha was hauling crates of produce through the service entrance when Elena, guided by her cane, appeared near the doorway. Her father would be furious if he knew, but she had followed the faint clatter of boxes. The rhythm she had learned belonged only to Martha. "Martha." Her voice was small, but insistent. Martha froze, her arms full of crates. "Miss Moretti, you shouldn't be here." Elena's lips curved into a half-smile. "You keep saying that. And yet here we are." Martha set the crates down, dusting her palms on her apron. She looked at Elena, at her delicate defiance, the way she stood tall despite the weight pressing down on her. "I shouldn't have said what I said," Martha whispered. "It wasn't my place." "But it was my truth," Elena countered. Her blind eyes lifted toward Martha's voice, unflinching. "Do you regret it?" The question cut deep. Martha's throat tightened. "I regret that I may have given you hope I can't prove." Elena stepped closer, her cane tapping between them. "Hope is not the worst thing I've ever been given. Pity is." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken fear. Martha wanted to reach for her, but the sound of approaching footsteps snapped her back. "Elena," her father's voice roared down the hall. Martha's eyes widened. She stepped back quickly, putting distance between them. "Go," she urged under her breath. "Please." But Elena didn't move fast enough. Alessandro Moretti rounded the corner, his gaze burning like fire. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Elena lifted her chin, her hand trembling on her cane. "Walking, breathing, living. Unless that is forbidden too." The words struck like daggers. For a moment, Alessandro faltered, but his jaw hardened again as his eyes cut to Martha. "You," he hissed. "Stay away from my daughter." Martha swallowed hard, bowing her head though rage churned in her chest. Elena's hand clenched around her cane, her voice breaking through the tension. "You can't keep me blind forever, Father." Alessandro stiffened, his face pale. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt the tremor of fear, not her own, but his. That night, Elena wept quietly in her room, her body trembling with confusion. She wanted to believe Martha, wanted to fight, but the weight of her father's shadow pressed her back into silence. Martha, alone in the kitchen, scrubbed pans until her hands bled. She told herself she should walk away, quit before she lost more than a job. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's blind gaze lifted toward her, fierce and unyielding. And she knew she couldn't leave. If you were Elena, caught between a father who wants to protect you with lies and a woman who risks everything to show you the truth, whose voice would you trust? Comment your answer below. The storm came on a Friday night. Thunder rattled the mansion's windows, and rain pounded the glass roof of the conservatory where Elena often sat alone. The staff scattered, half sent home early by the butler, the rest sheltering in the lower levels. The power flickered, plunging the grand halls into pockets of darkness. For Elena, the storm was almost soothing. Lightning meant nothing to her. She had lived in darkness her entire life. But the crack of thunder still made her jump, the vibrations thrumming through the floor beneath her feet. The butler, grumbling, brought her down to the kitchen. "It's safer here, Miss Elena." And warmer. She was too stunned to argue. Safer. Warmer. In the kitchen. With her. Martha looked up from the counter where she was chopping herbs by candlelight, her hands steady despite the storm outside. When she saw Elena being led in, her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "She'll stay here until the lights return," the butler announced, his disapproval evident in every syllable. "Do not entertain her." Elena smiled faintly in Martha's direction. "Entertain me? I didn't realize you were a performer." The butler scowled, muttered something under his breath, and left them alone. And just like that, they were together, forced by circumstance. The kitchen was a different world in the dark. Shadows flickered against copper pots. The storm's roar was muted by the thick stone walls, leaving only the sound of Martha's knife against the cutting board. Elena tilted her head, listening. "What are you making?" "Soup," Martha replied softly. "Something simple. Something warm." Elena smiled. "You always say simple, but nothing you make ever feels simple." Martha chuckled under her breath, shaking her head. "You can tell that just by tasting?" No, Elena's fingers brushed the table edge. "By listening. You cut the herbs like you're careful with them. You stir as though the soup has secrets. It's not simple. It's you." Martha's knife paused midair. Her throat tightened, heat flooding her chest. No one had ever seen her so clearly. Not her ex, not her family, not anyone. And here was Elena, blind, yet seeing everything. As the soup simmered, Martha poured it into a bowl and placed it before Elena. "Careful, it's hot." Elena smiled mischievously. "You sound like my father." "Then forgive me," Martha said, her voice softer now. "I never want to sound like him." Elena's smile faded. She dipped her spoon into the soup, tasted, and exhaled. "It's beautiful." They fell into silence, broken only by the storm outside. The candles flickered, casting Martha's face into shifting shadows Elena could not see. Yet Elena reached out across the table, her hand brushing against Martha's wrist. The contact was accidental, or maybe not. Martha froze, her pulse quickening beneath Elena's touch. "Elena," she whispered, warning and longing tangled in her voice. "Don't pull away," Elena said softly. "Please. I don't have anyone who stays." The words cut straight through Martha. She didn't move her hand. Not this time. The storm raged, but in the kitchen, time slowed. Why do you cook like that? Elena asked suddenly. Like it's the only way you can breathe? Martha stared at her, the truth rising like a tide she couldn't hold back. Because it is. Tell me. Elena's blind eyes turned toward her, intent. Tell me who you are when you're not my father's chef. Martha hesitated, but the darkness felt like a confessional. I grew up poor. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Cooking was how I helped. It was the only way I could give her love back. When she died, I kept cooking. Because if I stopped, it felt like I'd lose her completely. Elena's hand tightened around hers. So every dish you make, it's love. Martha's throat closed. Yes. They sat there, hand in hand, soup between them, thunder rolling outside. For Elena, it was the first time in years she didn't feel like porcelain, delicate, breakable, untouchable. For Martha, it was the first time someone had listened and understood. But the spell shattered with the slam of a door. Alessandro Moretti's footsteps thundered down the hall, his voice slicing through the storm. Elena. Martha pulled her hand back, heart lurching. Elena stiffened, her lips pressed tight. Her father entered the kitchen, his eyes narrowing at the sight. Elena sitting close to Martha. The bowls, the candles, the storm as their cocoon. What is this? Alessandro barked. Elena's chin lifted, fragile yet defiant. Dinner. Dinner. His voice was sharp with fury. Or disobedience? The words cut, but Elena didn't flinch. She simply whispered, maybe both. For the first time, Alessandro had no immediate reply. His daughter's defiance stunned him. He turned his glare on Martha, but Martha held his gaze, refusing to cower. The storm outside cracked the sky open, and in that split second of lightning, 3 lives collided, father, daughter, and the woman who had become the spark between them. That night, Alessandro forbade Martha from ever cooking privately for Elena again. But storms had a way of binding people together, and in that candlelit kitchen, a bond had formed that no command could undo. The storm passed, but its echoes lingered in the Moretti mansion. The next days were heavy with silence. Alessandro's disapproval hung like a sword, and the staff moved cautiously, as though the walls themselves might crack. But silence never stopped curiosity. And for Elena, silence only sharpened her hunger for answers. She remembered Martha's words, the warmth of her hand, the taste of soup that carried stories inside it. And she remembered the flicker, the possibility that her blindness was not what she had always been told. One afternoon, when the mansion napped in midday stillness, Elena slipped into the library. She traced the shelves with careful fingers, searching not for books, but for her father's safe. She had grown up hearing the quiet click of it opening and closing, the way he always locked away files after doctor's visits. She found it behind a row of encyclopedias. Her heart pounded as she pressed her ear against the lock, her fingers working the dial. She wasn't skilled, but her ears were sharp. The tumblers clicked softly beneath her touch. And then open. Inside were stacks of documents, folders labeled with her name. She pulled one free, her fingers skimming the braille label someone had thoughtfully embossed. Medical records. Her breath hitched. She opened the first page. Congenital blindness, it read. But then, beneath in finer print, retinal scarring, potential partial restoration if treated before adolescence. Her knees buckled. Treatment? She clutched the paper, her chest heaving. There had been a chance, a possibility, a door that her father had closed without ever telling her. Why? The sound of footsteps jolted her. She shoved the folder back, heart racing. The door creaked. Martha slipped in, her eyes widening when she saw Elena crouched by the open safe. Elena, what are you doing? Elena turned toward her, the papers trembling in her hands. Tell me the truth. Did you know? Did you guess? Martha's throat tightened. She stepped closer, gently taking the papers, scanning them with a quick glance. Her stomach dropped. My God, she whispered. They could have helped you. Elena's face crumpled. Then why didn't he? Martha had no answer. She knelt beside her, her hand brushing Elena's arm. Maybe he was afraid. Afraid of what? Elena's voice broke, raw and shaking. Afraid of losing control over me? The words sliced through the air, bitter and sharp. And though Martha wanted to soften them, she couldn't deny the truth she saw in them. For the first time, Elena wept openly in front of her. Not the quiet tears she had shed in solitude, but sobs that shook her body, breaking years of silence. Martha pulled her close, arms wrapping around her trembling frame. She whispered nothing, because sometimes words only deepen wounds. Instead, she held her, steady and strong, as Elena broke apart in her arms. Later, when the storm inside Elena quieted, Martha told her something she had never told anyone. My mother used to say, poverty blinds people just as much as illness does. When you're poor, you can't see choices. You only see survival. That was my life for years. Elena lifted her head, her face streaked with tears. And now, Martha's gaze softened. Now I cook. It's how I keep her alive. But sometimes I wonder if I've only traded one blindness for another. I bury myself in kitchens so I don't have to face the world outside. Elena reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. Then maybe we both deserve to open our eyes. Their fingers intertwined, fragile yet fierce. In that moment, their wounds became mirrors, different lives, different losses, but the same ache for freedom. But their fragile peace was shattered when the library door banged open. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his eyes dark, his voice a blade. What are you doing with those papers? Elena froze, her hands clutching the folder. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded, her voice trembling but firm. Why did you keep it from me? Alessandro's jaw clenched. Because it wasn't certain. Because hope can be crueler than blindness. That wasn't your choice to make. Elena cried, rising to her feet, her cane striking the floor like a gavel. Alessandro's face tightened, torn between fury and fear. He looked at Martha, accusation burning in his gaze. You put this nonsense in her head. Martha rose slowly, standing between them. She found it herself. Don't blame me for truths you buried. The room crackled with tension. Alessandro's fists curled, his voice low and shaking. You will leave this house. Elena gasped. No. She stepped closer to Martha, clutching her arm. If she leaves, I leave too. The words stunned them all. Even Elena herself trembled at her own audacity. But once spoken, they could not be undone. That night, Alessandro retreated to a study, whiskey trembling in his glass, haunted by his late wife's smile. Elena collapsed in her bed, exhausted but burning with a new fire. And Martha, alone in her quarters, stared at the ceiling, knowing she had crossed a line she could never return from. If you were Elena and discovered your parent had hidden a chance to change your life, would you forgive them or never look back? Share your thoughts below. The mansion seemed quieter after the confrontation, as though even its marble halls were holding their breath. Alessandro had not spoken to Elena in 2 days. Staff moved with wary eyes, whispering in corners. But Elena did not feel afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt awake. And it was Martha who kept her steady. It began in the garden. The morning sun warmed the air after the storm, and Elena, defiant of her father's absence, asked to be taken outside. The butler refused, citing Alessandro's strict orders. But Martha stepped forward, wiping her flour-dusted hands. I'll take her. The butler bristled. That isn't your. It's mine, Elena interrupted, her chin lifting. And she will take me. For a moment, it seemed the butler might argue. But Martha's steady gaze and Elena's unyielding tone silenced him. He stepped aside. And so, Martha guided Elena into the garden. Elena breathed deeply, the scent of damp soil and roses filling her lungs. She stretched her hands out, brushing against leaves, the rough bark of trees, the soft petals of blooms she had never seen. What color are they? She asked suddenly, her voice small but eager. Which ones? Martha asked. These. Elena cupped a rose gently in her hands. Martha smiled faintly. Red. Like fire when it's burning low. Not fierce, but warm. Elena tilted her head, imagining. I thought red would feel sharp, angry. It can be, Martha admitted softly. But this red, it feels like the way your voice changes when you're happy. Elena's lips parted, a breathless laugh escaping. You're terrible at describing colors. Martha laughed too, the sound low and unguarded. Then I guess I'll just have to keep trying until you understand. For the first time in years, laughter threaded through the mansion's garden. Later, they sat on the stone bench beneath the oak tree. Martha handed Elena a small pastry she had baked that morning. Here, try this. Elena bit carefully, then smiled. It tastes like sunlight. It's lemon, Martha chuckled. Elena shook her head. No, sunlight. Martha watched her savor the bite, her chest tightening. She wasn't supposed to feel this. She wasn't supposed to linger on the curve of Elena's smile or the way her blind eyes turned toward her like she was the only voice in the world. Elena, she began, her voice trembling. You shouldn't trust me so easily. Why not? Elena asked simply. Because your father doesn't trust me. Because if he finds out how much time we're spending. Elena cut her off, her hand reaching for Martha's. I don't care what he thinks. I've been trapped in this house all my life. For once, I want to choose who I'm with. Their fingers intertwined. Martha's breath caught, torn between fear and longing. Elena, I don't want to hurt you. Then don't, Elena whispered. As the afternoon passed, Martha began to teach Elena little things no one else had bothered with. How to knead dough by feeling its elasticity. How to tell when herbs were fresh by scent and texture. How to measure spices by pinching them between her fingers. Elena giggled as flour dusted her dress. My father would have a heart attack if he saw me like this. Then it's a good thing he's not here, Martha said, smirking. Elena's laughter faded into something softer. Do you know what I see when I'm with you? Martha's chest tightened. What? Possibility. The word hung between them, delicate and dangerous. That evening, they returned inside. Martha lit a candle in the kitchen and set down a small dish she had prepared. A simple stew, hearty and fragrant. Elena sat at the counter, listening to the gentle scrape of a spoon against the pot. This, Martha said, placing a bowl in front of her, isn't on the menu. Elena tasted it, her eyes closing. It feels like home. Martha leaned against the counter, watching her with a softness she could no longer hide. That's because it is. It was my mother's recipe. Elena swallowed hard, the flavors mixing with the weight of Martha's words. Thank you for sharing it with me. Their eyes, one pair blind yet searching, the other burdened yet open, locked in silence. And in that silence, something fragile but undeniable blossomed. But fragility was never safe in the Moretti mansion. That night, Alessandro returned early from his business trip. He found the flour still dusting the kitchen counters, the scent of stew lingering in the air. His face hardened. He did not confront them, yet. Instead, he watched from the shadows of the hall as his daughter laughed with the chef, a sound he had not heard since his wife was alive. And in his chest, something twisted. Fear, jealousy, grief. He realized he was no longer the only anchor in Elena's life, and he would not allow that. The next evening, the mansion buzzed with unusual energy. Alessandro had announced a dinner, an intimate but high-stakes gathering with investors and old friends. Elena was expected to attend, even though she rarely sat at public tables. Why tonight? She asked, her voice sharp as her maid dressed her in silk. Because it is time you show strength, Alessandro said, standing in the doorway. His tone was final. No more hiding. Elena wanted to argue, but she swallowed the words. She would not give him the satisfaction. Downstairs, Martha worked in the kitchen with her sleeves rolled up, preparing a spread fit for kings. But her heart wasn't in it. She knew what Alessandro was doing, putting Elena on display like a porcelain doll, pretending her blindness was a symbol of resilience when really it was a chain he had kept locked. When Elena entered the dining hall, her father guided her to the head of the table. She moved with practiced poise, though Martha, watching from the doorway, saw the subtle stiffness in her shoulders. Throughout the dinner, Alessandro dominated conversation, spinning tales of empire, control, and legacy. But then one guest asked lightly, "And your daughter, Does she ever hope for, what do they call it now, miracle surgery? The room laughed softly, as though blindness were a parlor trick. Elena froze, her spoon clattering against her bowl. Alessandro's hand tightened over hers. No, she has accepted her fate with grace. She knows her place. The words cracked like a whip. Elena's throat tightened, humiliation burning through her. But then her voice rose, clear, trembling, defiant. No, I haven't accepted anything. The room stilled. All eyes turned to her. Elena's blind gaze lifted, her chin trembling but proud. I learned that I had a chance once, that you kept it from me. Gasps rippled around the table. Martha's chest seized. She wanted to run to her, to shield her, but she was rooted in the doorway, powerless. Alessandro's face hardened, his voice icy. Who filled your head with this poison? Elena's lips parted. Her breath faltered. And then, before she could stop herself, she whispered, Martha. The name fell like glass shattering. I turned to the chef, standing at the doorway. Martha's heart sank. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted to be the weapon in this war. But Alessandro rose, his face thunderous, his hand slamming against the table. You dare, he growled, to corrupt my daughter? To make her question me? Elena shot to her feet, her voice breaking. She didn't corrupt me. She gave me hope. Alessandro's fury burned through the room. Hope is a lie. His gaze seared Martha. Pack your things. You're finished here. No. Elena's voice cracked, raw and desperate. She reached blindly for Martha's hand. If she leaves, I leave too. But Martha, stunned, terrified, and aching, stepped back. Elena, her voice wavered, a knife in her throat. Maybe I should go. Elena's head snapped toward her, her blind eyes wide, wet with disbelief. What? No. Don't you dare. Martha's hands trembled. I don't want to make things worse for you. You're not making it worse. You're the only thing making it bearable. Elena cried, her voice shaking with rage and sorrow. But Alessandro's voice cut through like thunder. You see, Elena? This is what happens when you trust outsiders. They always leave. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena's hand reached out, searching, but Martha did not take it. She couldn't. Her fear, her past, the weight of power in this house, it crushed her resolve. So she turned and walked away. Later that night, Elena sat alone in her room, her chest heaving with sobs that refused to stop. For the first time, the house that had always been her prison felt worse than darkness. It felt empty. Downstairs, Martha sat on her packed suitcase in the servants' quarters, tears burning her eyes. Her hands shook as she held a recipe card, her mother's handwriting, smudged with flour. She had come here to survive, not to love. And now love had betrayed them both. And Alessandro? He sat in his study, a decanter of whiskey untouched at his side. His victory felt hollow, haunted by the echo of his daughter's broken voice. The mansion was quieter than it had ever been. Even the clocks seemed reluctant to tick, as though they, too, mourned the rift tearing through its walls. Elena sat in her room with the curtains drawn, her fingers digging into the quilt of her bed. Her eyes burned, not from sight, but from a storm of feelings crashing inside her. Anger at her father, betrayal by Martha, loneliness so deep it felt like a second blindness. But beneath it all longing. She whispered into the silence, her voice trembling. Why did you leave me, Martha? Across the city, in a cramped apartment Martha had rented with what little savings she had, the same question echoed. She sat on her bed with her suitcase still unopened, her head in her hands. Why had she left? She told herself it was to protect Elena, to shield her from her father's wrath. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Fear had ruled her. Fear of losing her job, of being powerless again, of daring to love someone she was never meant to touch. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's face, the way she had reached out in desperation, the way her blind eyes had pleaded, "Don't leave me." Martha's chest tightened. She had left anyway. In the mansion, Alessandro tried to reclaim his control. He dined alone, held meetings in silence, and told himself he had protected his daughter from dangerous illusions. But at night, when the house creaked and the wind rattled the windows, he heard her muffled sobs through the walls. And his heart, prideful, hardened, afraid, cracked just a little more. Days passed in heavy quiet. Elena stopped leaving her room. She refused meals, sending trays away untouched. The staff whispered nervously, what if she grew ill? What if she wasted away in defiance? One night, Elena sat at her window, the city lights twinkling faintly in the distance. She could not see them, but she could feel them, like distant stars just out of reach. Her hands clenched the sill. I may be blind, she whispered, but I am not powerless. And in that moment, she decided. She would not wait for freedom to be given. She would reach for it. She called for her driver. Meanwhile, Martha sat in her apartment, staring at her mother's recipe card. The words blurred with tears. Am I a coward, she whispered, or just broken? Her phone buzzed suddenly, a message from an unknown number. She opened it. It was Elena. Just one line, typed shakily. Do you love me enough to come back? Martha's breath caught. Her hands trembled. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This was the choice she had been running from. If she went back, she risked everything. Her job, her safety, her already fragile place in the world. But if she didn't, she would lose Elena forever. She pressed the phone to her chest, whispering into the silence, yes. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just running. She was choosing. Back at the mansion, Elena stood at the gates, her cane trembling in her hand. She had slipped out while her father was in a late-night meeting. For the first time in her life, she was alone, vulnerable, free. But freedom without Martha felt hollow. She lifted her face to the night sky. If you love me, come, she whispered into the darkness, as though the universe itself might carry her words. Hours later, footsteps echoed up the mansion's gravel drive. Elena's heart leapt. She turned toward the sound. Elena, a voice whispered, shaking, breathless, familiar. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Martha. And then, arms wrapped around her, warm, trembling, desperate. I'm here, Martha whispered fiercely. I'm so sorry I left. I was afraid, but not anymore. Not of your father. Not of losing my place. Only of losing you. Elena buried her face in her shoulder, sobbing. Don't leave me again. Never, Martha promised, holding her tight. But their reunion was not unseen. From the balcony above, Alessandro stood in the shadows, watching. His face was unreadable, anger, grief, and something softer tangled together. He saw the way his daughter clung to Martha, the way her laughter trembled even through her tears. For the first time, he realized he might have already lost, not to blindness, not to fate, but to love. And he would soon have to make his own choice. If you were Alessandro, seeing your child choose love against your control, would you fight harder to keep them safe or finally let them go? Share what your heart tells you in the comments. The dawn crept gently over the Moretti mansion, painting the sky in soft blush and gold. Elena and Martha sat in the garden beneath the oak tree, where flower and laughter had once made the air feel lighter. Elena's fingers traced the rough bark, her head leaning against Martha's shoulder. She felt safe here, grounded by the steady rhythm of Martha's breathing. For once, the silence was not oppressive. It was sanctuary. But it would not last forever. They both knew Alessandro's shadow lingered, heavy and unspoken. The sound of footsteps broke the peace. Alessandro emerged, his suit jacket draped carelessly, his face drawn as though the weight of years pressed harder on him than usual. Elena straightened, her hand tightening around Martha's. Father, she said, her voice steady. He looked at them, and for the first time in decades, Alessandro Moretti seemed uncertain. His eyes softened just a fraction as they lingered on his daughter's hand entwined with the chef's. I should be furious, he began, his tone sharp but weary. You've defied me. Both of you. You've made me look weak in my own house. Elena's chin lifted, her blind eyes unwavering. You didn't make me weak, Father. You kept me weak. By hiding the truth. By keeping me in the dark, not just from the world, but from myself. Her words struck like arrows. Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he did not reply. Martha spoke then, her voice soft but firm. She deserves the truth. She deserves the chance to live. You think you're protecting her, but all you're doing is breaking her spirit. Alessandro's gaze snapped to her, sharp as steel. But Martha did not flinch. Why? Elena demanded, her voice cracking with years of longing. Why did you never tell me there was hope? The silence was unbearable. Finally, Alessandro's shoulders slumped. His voice dropped, rough and raw. Because I was afraid. Elena's breath caught. Afraid of what? Of losing you, Alessandro whispered. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. When your mother died, I promised her I would protect you. But the doctors said treatment wasn't certain. I couldn't risk giving you hope, only to see it crushed. So I built walls instead. I thought if I controlled everything, I could keep you safe. Elena's throat burned. Safe doesn't mean alive, father. The truth hung heavy between them. For the first time, Alessandro saw not the fragile child he had guarded, but a woman, strong, brave, unyielding. Elena reached out her hand, trembling. If you ever loved me, truly loved me, then let me go. Let me choose my life, my heart, my sight if it's possible. Her words trembled in the air. Martha held her breath, watching. And then Alessandro stepped forward. Slowly, shakily, he took his daughter's hand. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Then live, Elena. Live." Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she felt not controlled, but freed. The weeks that followed blurred into something new. Elena, with Martha at her side, visited specialists beyond the mansion walls. The world outside was terrifying and exhilarating. The smell of crowded streets, the hum of markets, the feel of rain on her skin without a roof overhead. For once, she wasn't afraid to stumble. Martha was always there, steady and patient. Doctors confirmed what Martha had suspected. Elena's blindness was not total, and with surgery, there was a chance, fragile but real, that she might see. The night before the operation, Elena sat in her hospital bed, Martha beside her. What if it doesn't work? Elena whispered, her hands trembling. Then we'll face the darkness together, Martha murmured, taking her hand. And if it does work, then you'll finally see the world you've always imagined. Elena's lips curved faintly. You'll be the first thing I want to see. Martha's chest ached, tears burning her eyes. Then I promise I'll be here. The morning came. The surgery lasted hours, stretching time like a cruel trick. Alessandro paced the hospital halls, his hands restless. Martha sat in the waiting room, clutching the recipe card she always carried, her anchor, her prayer. Finally, the surgeon emerged, weary but smiling. It will take time, and her vision may never be perfect, he said. But yes, she will see. Martha's breath broke into a sob. Alessandro covered his face with trembling hands. Days later, when the bandages were removed, Elena blinked against the light. Shapes and colors swirled, hazy and overwhelming. And then Martha's face came into focus. Elena gasped, tears spilling freely. You're beautiful. Martha laughed through her own tears, cupping Elena's face. And you're stubborn. They kissed then, soft, trembling, filled with every unspoken word. Back at the mansion, Alessandro watched them from the doorway as they returned to the garden, laughing, hands entwined. For once, he didn't interfere. His heart still ached with fear, but beneath it, pride bloomed. He turned away, whispering into the empty hall. Maria, I kept my promise. She's alive. She's free. Under the oak tree, Elena tilted her face toward the sky. For the first time, she saw the red of roses, the gold of sunlight, the soft blue of Martha's eyes. I can see, she whispered, voice breaking with awe. And the first thing I see is love. Martha's arms wrapped around her. You'll never lose it again. And with that, the story that had begun in blindness ended not just with sight, but with freedom, forgiveness, and a love that had finally, unexpectedly, found its place. What does true love mean to you? Sacrifice, freedom, or the courage to face the unknown together? Share your heart in the comments.